Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day. And check out our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. Check out our altar sleeves. Support the show by using the code MAGICMICS at checkout for 5% off anything in the store. I'm Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl.
Hey guys, welcome back.
Ruben Bressler.
What's up? How are you feeling?
Me? So far, so good.
You. Okay, good.
Good.
Eyes are getting a little bit better.
Right, then peepers, you need those.
Excellent.
Good peepers, healthy peepers are good. We also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent and letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our retro top 10. That's not correct. As one of our lizard and dinosaur cards. That was what we were doing this last week.
That's right. Top 10 Scaly Boys. Well, peep this comment from Robert Fitzpatrick. On 3. After 3, pick one. 1, 2, 3. Rock, paper, scissors, lizard. How did you not mention MTG's rock, paper, scissors game? Cards from Unglued and cards from Unglued and reprinted in Unsanctioned. It makes no sense compared to the other two, but it's lizard with some scissors for a face.
Yeah, this is one of the things I'm super happy they did reprint in Unsanctioned, because the originals were getting a little bit of pricey there. Scissors Lizard did show up in Unglued for 4 generic mana. It's a 4/3 common artifact creature lizard, and creatures named Paper Tiger can't attack or block because that's what the scissors stop.
Right.
And Paper Tiger, and then there's the Rock Monster.
Rock Lobster.
Rock Lobster, of course.
Right.
And yeah, that's how all those things work together.
Yep. One of my favorite sets of cards of all time. I think through this pandemic, I have bought over 700 copies of the sets through the pandemic and used as giveaways for the Magic community to mostly lift spirits. I did it for like the support the local card stores through the pandemic thing, and that was really fun. So yeah, I think I've bought a lot of these sets.
I used to use them for chops when I played Vampire the Masquerade, when you had to do like randomization effects.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know multiple players who have 2 copies of these in their deck boxes. You get some, I get some. Let's pick one and let's go. And that's just how you roll. So get your own set and have fun if you want. Or
get on Nerd Girl's good side and get one for free.
Right. So let's see. Is this Obert Fitzpatrick?
Robert.
Oh, I didn't copy him. I was like, it's Robert, right?
I think it was me that screwed that up.
Could be. Because I was like, wait, it's Robert. No, it's not.
Pretty sure it's Robert.
It's Robert. Well, Robert, thanks for being a part of the show. Please contact us on social media. Twitter DM is preferred. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway. And stay tuned for our top 10 list this week. And maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate, because it is time to talk about the top 10 colorless and land cards on Arena. I only got 1 land on here. I'm not going to lie.
I decided to put no lands on my list because I wanted to talk about all the colorless stuff. And I love lands. If this were a list of only colorless things, my list would be nothing but lands. Because I love lands. I play too many lands, and lands are great. So
I mean, 2.
Yeah, I got 2. I got 1. Yeah, it's fun. They're neat. But for my number 10 here, now this, you guys have a higher as your number 10s.
I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to carry the weight of the number 10 all by myself. But that's okay. This is one of my favorite equipments just ever. This thing has gotten really expensive. Jesus Christ. This thing is over $20 per copy. This card shows up in a whole variety of decks. This shows up as a one of, like in some of the blue-white aggro affinity kind of lists in Historic. It shows up in tons and tons of lists in Brawl decks because it's great. It's 1 mana. It fits in basically anywhere you want it to be, and that's Shadowspear.
Yeah.
Shadowspear is fantastic. It is 1 generic mana for a rare legendary equipment. It says equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has trample and lifelink. Trample and lifelink and +1/+1. Super sick. And not to be, and we ain't done. Not only does it equip for 2 generic mana, okay, for 1 generic mana, permanents your opponent's control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. That's a nice Titan you got there. It can die now thanks to this stupid turn 1 mana equipment. This thing is amazing.
Yeah.
It's also one of the only, that loss of hexproof. I know you guys aren't all limited fans, but this was one of the only answers for Dream Trawler in the format.
Mhm.
At rare, which was always super upsetting. But yeah, this card is awesome. Lifelink and Death Touch is a really good. Lifelink and Trample is a really good combination. Death Touch and Trample would have been the only better one out there, really, that we would have wanted. But
Sure.
And Death Touch and Trample is hard to kind of communicate and explain that you're
and
doing
you can put
lethal
it on a
damage.
Death Toucher, right? Like
And
you can put this on a Fang of Shinobi if you
Mhm.
really want to.
it definitely wasn't a complaint. I'm just
Oh,
saying
no.
that's the only thing that would make it more busted.
Absolutely. This thing is spectacular in my Oswald Fiddlebender historic brawl deck.
Mhm.
And yeah, being able to, deal with a Carnage Tyrant or counter a Snakeskin Veil or deal with an Ulamog is a huge deal. And I love this card for sure.
Yeah, the card's so good. Like, it's over $20 now. I shouldn't be that surprised. The extended art foil is $80.
Oh.
So
wow.
Enjoy. Let's move on here to our number 9. Ruben, what's number 9?
My number 9 is a card I wanted to talk about because I love it in its paper form. And I love it even more in its alchemy form. They buffed some cards in alchemy and they gave us much better versions. And one of the biggest all-stars that got a huge boon from alchemy becoming a format is Cosmos Elixir.
It's true.
Cosmos Elixir was originally from Kaldheim. It's a 4-mana artifact rare. And the printed version says that at the beginning of your end step, you draw a card if your life total is greater than your starting life total. Otherwise, you gain 2 life. And then they made it even better by saying that you can gain 2 life and scry 1 if that is the case.
This card's really fun. I'm glad that they buffed it to get some play because I thought it was very unique and I was pretty bummed that it didn't see any play. It was good and limited, but that was kind of it. So now that it's actually got a little bit of a boost, we're seeing it pop up from time to time in some special brew lists in alchemy, and that's nice.
There's I don't know. I guess because life gain tends to just be so popular amongst new players and honestly less sort of experienced and seasoned players, almost anything that gains life gets like a ton of traction. There's tons of life gain decks in historic, and there's lots of life gain stuff in the brawl queues and whatnot, or the historic brawl queues. But Cosmos Elixir is fantastic. I'm glad they buffed it. It was a card that like I wanted it to be better. You know what I mean? I tried it and I was like, it just needs it, and like just that extra little scry to kind of set up your draws to find you the wraths or whatever you're trying to do with a deck that features Cosmos Elixir helps out a whole bunch. Nerdgirl, what's number 9?
My last of 2 hires.
Oh, well, you started off with 2 hires, didn't you? Well, all right then. Well, my number 9 is sweet. This card is absolutely fantastic. From the first time it showed up, this card is over $10. They have printed it 6 times. One of them in a mystery booster, one of them is a secret lair drop, and that's okay too, because it's a card that way back in the day just didn't kind of exist. You expected a card like this to exist, but once they finally put to print the words that lands you control have tapped for any color of mana, and it itself taps for mana in the Chromatic Lantern. Chromatic Lantern is Chromatic Lantern is a fantastic card. It's 3 generic mana. Originally showed up in Return to Ravnica, showed back up in Guilds of Ravnica, so it's on Arena, which is great. It's a rare artifact that says lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, and it taps to add 1 mana of any color. Your multicolor decks, most commander decks are multicolor, so this works with your 2-color decks, your 3-color, all the way up to your 5-color monstrosities, and I've gotten a hell of a lot of use out of mine.
Yeah, this was a card on my short list for sure.
Same. This was a very last second cut from my list as well. Chromatic. Now you got me doing it.
See?
Chromatic Lantern control was just like fun, right? Like it was for all those players that missed Vivid Lands, right? You just play all the biggest, weirdest stuff, the Aliantrazis of the world that just want to cast, 3 black pips and also 4 blue pips in the same card in the same deck. And this card is so simple and elegant and yet so like balanced. Like this is not an overpowered Magic card, and it's a great entry.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on here to the number 8, I suppose here. Now, number 8 for me is my only hire,
and it's my last hire.
Oh,
So
Uh,
I
we
can
have
carry.
all unique top 7s, but
Wow.
we'll let you carry this one.
We need the carry, nerd girl.
All right. My number 8 is a beautiful sideboard card that, is surprising how much play it's getting at being only an uncommon. And that's Soul Guide Lantern.
Ooh.
A 1-mana artifact that says when Soul Guide Lantern enters the battlefield, exile target card from a graveyard. You can tap to sacrifice Soul Guide Lantern, exile each opponent's graveyard, which is pretty key as well. And then you can also pay 1, tap, sacrifice it to draw a card as a replacement effect should its ability not be relevant. So all in all, this is a wonderful sideboard card that's going to deal with a lot of graveyard hate stuff and come in pretty nifty.
Yeah. The come into playability and the threat of the Tormod's Crypt ability afterwards is huge. The ability to cycle itself, it makes it a main deckable card in many cases. Particularly in Lurrus decks, this card was a bear to have to deal with because you would either draw a card every turn or get rid of your opponent's cats every turn out of their Witch's Oven deck.
Yeah, this was, the weird little twist on Relic of Progenitus. Did you know that Relic of Progenitus is like $5+ uncommon?
Wild.
Author of God.
Originally printed as a common too.
Yeah, in Shards of Alara, because no one thought it was that interesting, but turns out. Soul Guide Lantern already up to almost $3 because this card is stupid. And people don't just play on their sideboards, they play it main because I'll play red, black, and historic, and here comes that stupid freaking card, taking out my Croxes, taking out my super fun stuff I'm trying to regrow with all my super cool red, black cards, my Kolaghan's commands. Nope.
Your Dreadhorde Arcanists, no more fun for you.
Does nothing. This card is stupid and I don't like it because it's so powerful, and that's kind of why I like it.
Great entry though.
But it's still a fantastic entry for how crazy warping it can be. Like, just changes the game. You're like, okay, if I had anything to do with my graveyard, now we're not. Let's move on here to number 7. Ruben, what's number 7?
My number 7 is the glue that holds it all together. We've long lauded and celebrated the Strixhaven limited format. We've talked about a lot of things that make it unique and interesting and fun. And we've also talked about how much we hate iTwitch on this show. No podcast probably name drops iTwitch as much as this show. And beyond the end game giant kill you spells, perhaps no colorless card ties the room together quite as much as Environmental Sciences. Environmental Sciences is a 2 generic mana sorcery lesson from Strixhaven School of Mages that says search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. You gain 2 life.
This card's fantastic.
This was my number 9. This
Nice.
is a wonderful card in limited, which you don't really expect this sort of ability to be super important, but also it's fantastic in constructed. And even seeing some play even after the biggest learn spell is getting, got the chop, we're still seeing this card and it's great.
Yeah, this is just a wonderful card that really showcases how cool lessons are. I really don't like iTwitch, but I love this lesson because it's a little bit like venturing to the dungeon, but it's totally different in that you needed to draft the lessons that you're going to play in order to access them. They did constrain your sideboard a little bit, so you can't just run infinite lessons in them, and constructed, which is cool as well. And it's just one of those cards that, like, it doesn't get a little love. It's not the flashiest thing in the world, but a lot of Magic games would just not happen if this card didn't exist.
This is the most important lesson in limited. Like, I love Introduction to Annihilation, Introduction to philosophy. Yeah. All the colorless. I mean, obviously I'd love to have a Mascot Exhibition, but games live and die by whether I can get my Environmental Sciences. And I also love the flavor of the colorless lessons because all of the mages have to take the introductory courses. So I think that's really flavorful and cool as well. And yeah, this card, I read it and was like, it's a bad lay of the land that gains 2 life. What am I missing? Turns out when you have a bunch of spells that have this attached to it in your deck, and you only have to run one of the basic land type for your 3rd or 4th splash color, really makes everything come together.
This is a good example of, as the draft format went onward, I took this higher and higher, earlier and earlier. I was
Absolutely.
like, I have to have one of these in my deck. I don't care if I'm bypassing X, Y, and Z. I don't cast this, I lose the game oftentimes. Nerd Girl, what's number 7?
All right, moving on to my number 7 is a fun, unique card that was kind of seeing a lot of play in decks it probably shouldn't have, and that's because of its mana cost. This is a fun card on its own. It's flavorful and also enabled some silly combos, and that's Stonecoil Serpent.
Ooh.
This is my number 10.
An X costing snake spell to 0/0 with reach, trample, protection from multicolor. And when Stonecoil Serpent enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, because it has 0 mana cost, you can cast it for 0. It'll die as soon as it enters battlefield, but you can use that to cast like your Tybalt's Trickery type decks and your nonsense. And so it was seeing a lot of play in those decks, but also it was just a solid card, and it was protection from multicolor, which was able to take down some of those multicolor flyers in the format that were a big problem. And yeah, all around, I think it's a solid card.
You remember when they made an Eldrazi that was X generic mana for an XX?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was so Eldrazi, y'all. That was so.
Yeah, I mean,
so
Endless
wacky.
One's keywords were that it was an Eldrazi. This one's keywords are significantly more powerful,
awesome.
But it isn't an intro. Yeah. Also, the award for has reach for some reason goes to this card. I definitely have run into Stonecoil Serpents by accident a number of times. This card's insane. This card's spectacular. It's a great 1-drop. It's a great 2-drop. It's a great 7-drop.
Yeah, this is a card that we needed after Hydroid Krasis had done what it did kind of to standard, and we had some that was huge that had not only protection from it, but could also block it. I agree, it could kind of sneak up on you because a lot of times just felt like a sort of a trampling attacker, but then all of a sudden it blocked your super cool dragon or whatever. But yeah, this card is fantastic. It, obviously it scales as well as you want it to, turn 1 and turn 9, and it's just fantastic. It's one of those cards that, like, I don't know when we're going to see a card with this many sweet keywords and this kind of power level, because Throne was definitely that set where they're like, we're going to crank it. We're going to make them good. And this is what happens when they did. All right here. So for my number 7, man, we are in wacky land. This is a insane magic card. This is a really weird magic card. This is a magic card that is $15+ no matter where you're trying to find it, because no magic card does what this does. I mean, there's a certain sort of, I don't know, there's certain pizzazz. There's a sizzle to the steak when you're able to throw out weird stuff. And like just today, for example, Rosewater threw out like his little hints and his teasers for the upcoming set and what is it supposed to do and all this weird little stuff. And there's only one card in Magic's history that has the words pay 50 life on it.
That's true.
That's Aetherflux Reservoir. Aetherflux Reservoir is 4 generic mana for a rare artifact originally from Kaladesh. Whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you've cast this turn. That's all. That's all you do. Well, you pay 50 life, Aetherflux Reservoir deals 50 damage to target creature or player. And whenever you have a silly loop and life gain is involved, this card just finds its way in the conversation. That's just what it does.
Yeah. Or if you can cast an ad nauseum number of spells. And I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. Pay 50 life, do something. Pay 50 life, Like it didn't matter what the card did. The fact that we deal damage to a creature is hilarious.
It's hilarious.
Like we can kill a Platinum Angel with this card. Or just a 1/1. Or a player deal 50 damage. I love it.
50 life is an awful lot, but I've always liked life gain decks and fun, silly alternate win conditions. So these are always fun.
Yeah.
It will come and get you. All right. Let's move on into number 6. Ruben, what's number 6?
Number 6 is a card that we knew was coming kind of when it got printed, and yet we were still kind of impressed because the first iteration of this character on a card won a Pro Tour. The next iteration of this character on a card dominated a format. And when Dominaria came around, we knew we were going to get another Karn. And we were like, how could they possibly top the Silver Golem? How could they possibly top Karn Liberated? And they didn't have to, but they gave us something so solid, so good, so flavorful and interesting without breaking anything, without they went right up to the edge and teetered on the edge without turning anything into mush with Karn, Scion of Urza. 4 generic mana gets you a 5 loyalty planeswalker, legendary planeswalker Karn with 3 abilities. +1, reveal the top 2 cards of your library. An opponent chooses one of them. Put that card into your hand and exile the other with a silver counter on it. -1, put a card you own with a silver counter on it from exile into your hand. -2, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with. This creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control.
This was one of the ones I definitely considered for my short list. It ended up getting the cut kind of late just because I don't know that I haven't seen it a ton, and I'm never very scared of it when I do.
So it's a draw engine. It's not an end of the game planeswalker.
Yeah.
Right. It's a draw engine, but it gives your opponent the first kind of take away from what you're going to draw. You also know what they can get, so you can kind of prepare for that a little bit. But for 5 loyalty to go up to 6 on a generic planeswalker that can be put in literally any deck that exists, which is great. The minus ability sort of by itself is great, but if you can build around it, it's even better. To be able to make 2 0/0s that are gigantic is fantastic. But ultimately, the long game, it helps win you the long game. This was one of the beauties of Dominaria, which is this planeswalker is cool, interesting, powerful in its own way, but will not dominate the standard format, but is a interesting way to use the planeswalker space in a standard format. And it was just fantastic.
Yes. I like the evaluation of value card that is not dominating. And that is part of the reason I left it off my list, because after the other Karns and the other planeswalkers that are typically colorless that we might see later, to me, it seemed very flat.
Yeah,
it doesn't drop kick your metagame.
It may not be an A+ in power level, but it certainly to me was an A+ in turning flavor into rules text.
There you go.
Because you get the silver counters from the silver golem, you get the 0/0 constructs learned from Urza originally, and I just think that it translated super well into the formats that it was in.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on here to Nerd Girls number 6. What you got?
All right, number 6 is a card that was a little bit of a terror that ruined people's days because the matches themselves took days. This card got a ban for only a 1 mana uncommon. Seeing a ban on a Witch's Oven, it tells you that something is drastically wrong. Witch's Oven is a 1 mana artifact that says you could tap, sacrifice a creature, create a food token. If that creature's toughness was 4 or greater, create 2 food tokens instead, which creates this never-ending loop with the cat oven combo, which again made the games take forever. You had to click something like 7,000 times or something to end the game because you have to cycle through that cat so many times for these ping triggers, and it was just annoying and nobody liked it. I think it's a fun mechanic, but it's not fun to play against. It's very dragging on, but unique, and to see an uncommon get banned was interesting.
Just like, who was having fun with that combo?
I mean, I was little.
I was too.
I was because I like winning, but God, it was tedious as hell.
But again, it was super flavorful because we got the Witch's Oven and we've got the Cauldron familiar that's the Witch's black cat. And the cat came back the very next day. We thought he was a goner, but the cat came back. The cat came back the very next day. And now we've got the Witch's Oven, where if you put enough meat in the oven, you get a bigger pie. And that's super flavorful too.
I liked the Witch's Cauldron as well with the newt back in the day, where it had a cool combo there too.
Like Festering Newt and Bog Witch or something. Yeah, that was also awesome.
Right. And that was, this is just one of those, they pushed it in Throne of Eldraine. They said, yes, this is going to be a loop that people kind of have to get used to or get over. And it was. And it turned into a Sensei's Divining Top situation where it was just so annoying to play against. It's not that it was unbelievably powerful. It was just God, every, minutes of my game is going to be just this. Wait for it, sack for it, wait for it. Okay, sack for it, wait. It just, it wore me down and it made me sad. And this is a card that I get the power level, but I also get the annoyance factor.
It wore me down, but I think it's just, I would rather this be the thing that's too powerful, something, or this be the thing that is too tedious and end the game eventually, than, for example, top, which doesn't end the game by itself.
Well, according to the copyright, I'm bringing y'all 19 years in the past for my number 6. This card is amazing. This card is one of those cards that I love it just on the face of it. I love it when I came back to Magic that it made my jaw drop. I love it that I can just I can show it to my mom and she understands what it means when you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. They get that. They understand it. They know what a Platinum Angel does. They may not know anything else, but they know what the words say. 7 generic mana for a 4/4 rare from Mirrodin. It's an artifact creature angel, has flying, and you can't lose the game, and your opponents can't win the game. I'm telling, when I came back to Magic, this just, my head exploded when I was like, this does what? And you can, huh? And I was like, how is this not reigning over standard as the go-to thing to do? And, obviously I learned better at the time, but man, it reads like $1 million.
It was not ever really a powerhouse in any format, but it read so uniquely and still does to this day. You could tooth and nail for it back in the day, for example. That was very popular. There was a vintage deck back in the day when it was printed called Blue Angels, because this was printed along with cards that said you lose the game if you don't do a thing. So you would tap out for a Platinum Angel and then Pact of Negation all your opponent's spells and then just not pay for your Pact, which was really fun. Platinum Angel is great. It's a really cool card. And there are some board states where you're just like, well, I can't possibly win, so I might as well never lose.
Yeah, I think it didn't. It's very expensive, and removal does kind of deal with it. So you have to have a lot of stuff to kind of protect it in that way. And you leave yourself kind of vulnerable by letting your life total go down really low. I was never in a place where this was standard playable, I think I was either on a break or something. And I came back to seeing this in more Eternal games like EDH and things. And I'm just like, oh, okay, I need to deal with that. And it kind of changes the game, sort of like the 9 lives card and stuff like that, where you now have a secondary mission before you can win the game. And the answer is, or the second quest is to deal with this, and then you can go about your game, which is kind of an interesting idea to add to a game.
Yeah, and they've not changed the artwork except for the Kaladesh Invention version, which makes sense because it's iconic as hell. It was in standard for during Mirrodin, as well as Magic 2010, 10th edition, and Magic 2011. But otherwise, it's only seen print and Conspiracy take the crown. But again, it's in Arena thanks to the Historic Anthology, which is fantastic, and it just, as a Magic card, it's wonderful. It's just wonderful.
Absolutely.
Let's move on here to number 5. Ruben, what's number 5?
Well, as you know, many of my go-to top 10 qualifications are as follows. Is it in the cube? Is it on a banned list? And has it won a Pro Tour? This one is in a cube and is on a banned list. So that is why we're now talking about perhaps one of, if not the best generic 5-color planeswalkers of all time, or not planeswalkers, commanders of all time, Golos the Tireless Pilgrim. Golos Tireless Pilgrim is a 5 generic mana legendary artifact creature scout from Core Set 2020. It's a 3/5 that says that when Golos Tireless Pilgrim enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a land card. That's any land. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle, and then it has an activated ability. 2 generic and Wooburg. That's white, blue, black, red, green. Exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn without paying their mana costs.
Yep, that card's annoying. I've definitely seen a lot of this played in commander formats. I mean, it even made some silly limited decks. If you get a good build around for Golos, you're in some trouble.
This card was not fair. This was one of those why are you like this? There was a period where we were like, why are you like this, when they made Magic cards for about a year or so between Throne, through M20 or so, maybe through Ikoria, when you're just like, would you just stop, please? Golos was just dumb. Golos was banned when it was like the most popular commander, or like the second most popular commander. I can't remember exactly which. It was like Atraxa and Golos, or Golos and Atraxa. So it was a big deal when they got rid of this unbelievably powerful thing. Like when I realized that second ability, the Wooburg ability, doesn't have tap, doesn't stop you from doing it multiple times. If you got nuts mana, you can just go completely insane. Why? How is this fair? I'm not sure, but I'm glad it's banned. There's a reason it's not $1 million, just because it's banned in Commander.
And of course, the 7 mana activated ability made it so that your 5 mana went and searched for your 6th land. So you played your 7th land and activated the ability. Those 2 colorless meant that you could go search for a Field of the Dead, also oftentimes banned and also oftentimes annoying, that would come in tapped, which is great. And then you'd play your 7th land, make a zombie, and then go to town with Golos. It's an extremely good card. Probably one of the best scouts ever printed.
It showed you like what a little tiny Primeval Titan can do. Just a little itty bitty. Like it goes and gets the world tree, and then you untap land and ability. And like that's just
in Vintage, it goes and gets Mishra's Workshop. Like it does some wild stuff in certain formats for sure.
Unbelievable.
I think Field of the Dead was, of all that thing that you listed, was one of my biggest problems with Golos. I think I hate that card more than any other card in the history of ever, almost.
Yeah, there was no way to stop it. You couldn't pith and needle it. You couldn't really destroy it that well.
Nope.
And there was nothing really to stop it at all. That's great. Nerd Girl, what's your number 5?
All right, so my number 5 is not necessarily the flashiest of heroes, but certainly the hero we needed. And that is simple, easy introduction for Field of Ruin. This card stops the Exalted book combo, and also we've had the most powerful creature lands that I think we've ever seen all piled into one standard format. And so Field of the Ruin reads, you could tap, add a colorless, or pay 2, tap, sacrifice Field of Ruin, destroy target non-basic land and opponent controls. Each player searches their library for a basic land and puts it onto the battlefield, then shuffles. With Faceless Havens in the format and all of these D&D creature lands, it's so powerful. And I do want to say that the best thing I've seen with this is someone Stone Rain themselves by cracking their Field of the Ruin to hit a creature land on the green side of the board and have them Snakeskin Veil it. So that was super great.
Ooh, I love that.
Wow.
That's good stuff.
That's a lot. The Field of Ruin $10.50 Innistrad double feature foil, which is fun. This is a card that just sees so much play in so many decks. Wizards does not make land destruction, but they will make land answers, I guess is a way to put it. You exchange the resource, you don't remove the resource.
They once upon a time gave us Wasteland. Obviously, that was way too well. They once upon a time gave us Strip Mine. Obviously, that was way too good. They once upon a time gave us Wasteland, which, as they printed more non-basic lands, stayed too good, although it holds Legacy together as a format. And they've been trying to give us a fixed Wasteland for a long time. They gave us Ghost Quarter. We had Terra. We had, what was the Teenage Wasteland? The Terramorphic, Tectonic
Edge.
Tectonic Edge.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good one. But Field of Ruin is probably the best because it's just totally ubiquitous. It also replaces itself, which is huge. I really appreciate the design in this card.
Yeah, for those who have not gotten to play with Strip Mine is restricted. Strip Mine has been restricted. I've had a brood of children, and this thing has been restricted their entire lifetime. They will never get to play for Strip Mine like I did for a very short period of time. It was not fair.
No,
it was fun for the person with the Strip Mine. It was not fair.
It wasn't even that fun for the person with the Strip Mine.
It was, your opponent would get pissed and they would scoop and fill out the slip and leave the store. And you'd be like, well, we'll never see that person again. And that was life back in the 90s.
Yeah.
For my number 5 here, this is a terrific card. Now there has to be something, that like glues it all together. for formats, whether they're big or small, whether they're powered or unpowered, something's got to be there to make sure the bolts are connected and everything works. And then sometimes you need the fireworks. You need the kind that blow your hair back. The giant speakers are there and they blow you through the wall, Back to the Future style. Like you go kaboom. And that is the lesson in Mascot Exhibition. We're here to go big. We're here to go mythic. If you're choosing the low end, I'm going to choose the high end. Mascot Exhibition is here to stay. It is 7 generic mana. That is a Urzatron mana for a mythic sorcery lesson. You create a 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying, a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token, and a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. You can just go find those. I have 2 in my sideboard pretty much always, and I love this stupid card.
Yeah, the card is absurd. I've lost way too many limited games for that card. But in Constructed, I think it's a little bit more fair. And especially now that we've lost Divide by 0, I think it's a far more reasonable card. I like it overall. I think it's super flavorful. I like the art on the card. And I liked all of the different mascots of the different houses of Strixhaven. So I thought it was a super flavorful card that kind of tied the entire set together very well.
Absolutely. I think that Mascot Exhibition is, for all of its ails and all of us not liking losing to it, and also the win percentage between a deck that has access to a Mascot Exhibition and one that doesn't in that limited format has got to be the widest I've ever seen of any format. Because, colorless mythics are good, but colorless mythics that you can put on 5 other cards in your deck gotta be through the roof, right? Like it is your 7-drop. If you draft it, it's gotta be a 20% swing at least in win percentage.
I don't know about the swing, but I definitely recall seeing statistics about the format, and needless to say, this gave you the highest indicator that you would do well in a draft.
Of course,
kind of odd, but
it's the win condition mythic that you could just draft, cram session and
it fit in every deck, literally.
Hunt for specimens, and then also go get your 7-drop 3 creatures, 9 power. Yeah, thing is absurd and great, and I love it.
It's wild that you can staple it to so many cards, and at the very, very worst, just put it in your deck. Just play a 7-mana sorcery that makes 3 great creatures, and that's what you do. Let's move on here to number 4. Ruben, what's number 4?
Speaking of number 4, or speaking of going back to the 90s, we're going to go back to Alpha. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 22 versions, 23 versions of this card have been printed over the course of Magic's history. Once again, I'm talking about a card that has not won 1 Pro Tour, but won 2 Pro Tours, has not won Worlds once, but has won Worlds twice, is not just an iconic art, but is multiple iconic arts at this point. I'm talking, of course, about everyone's favorite Icy Manipulator.
Nice.
Icy Manipulator is a 4 generic mana common, or uncommon at this point. I don't know if it was an uncommon when it was printed in Alpha. I feel like it was it uncommon? So it's been an uncommon the whole time?
It's been uncommon the whole time.
It was a mono artifact originally, but it of course is now printed with the following text. Pay a generic mana and tap to tap target artifact, creature, or land.
That's a $2,200 Alpha card?
Sure.
Whoa.
Oh, do you know how many of those I owned? Oh my god.
It's Alpha.
I will say I had no idea that I had won that many tournaments, which is impressive.
It's a lot.
This card is super fun and limited. I've never really played a deck with it in Constructed. But yeah, that's a heck of a resume.
The Ice Age Icy Manipulator was one of the first cards I ever saw. I saw it basically right after I saw Blinking Spirit and figured out what that card did and fell in love with Magic. And I was like, ooh, what are these other cards? And I was like, Icy Manipulator from Ice Age looked like the most insane bone crank machine thing I'd ever seen. Was absolutely fascinating. Yeah, but it was still super cool and interesting. I'd never seen anything like it, on any game per se. And I loved it. I also thought it was rare for a very long time because there's no rarities on the cards.
Right.
You just didn't know. I was like, this card's too cool and looks too neat to not be rare, but obviously it wasn't. But Icy Manipulator is terrific. Honestly, I was more surprised when I saw the Alpha, unlimited whatever version holding the little orb when I'm like, no, it's the Bone Crank. It's not the orb guy. It's the Bone Crank.
Right.
But no. Yeah.
And I looked up the tournaments. The worlds that it won were in 1994 and 1995 in the hands of Zach Dolan and Alexander Blumka. It also won the first Pro Tour New York 1996 in Michael Lecanto's classic blue-white deck, and also Nikolai Herzog's limited Pro Tour Amsterdam when he won 2 back-to-back limited Pro Tours. So we'll count that one. So it won 1.5 Pro Tours if we're qualifying limited Pro Tours for that. But it won 4 major tournaments in the early to mid 90s.
Not limited Pro Tours.
I mean, you got to know you're at the seminal event when your deck is called the deck.
Yeah.
It's called the deck.
And Nikolai Herzog won a Pro Tour in 2004. So it won 4 Pro Tours over the course of a decade, right? So
yeah. Very, very powerful. Super good card. Nerd Girl, what is your number 4?
All right. So kind of similar to my number 5, same vein. I did put 2 land cards in my top 10 today. And, this is a card that I think most of us are sick of, but it was pretty cool and unique at the time and did very well. I haven't seen creature lands put in as much work as they have until recently, and no land put in more work than Faceless Haven.
Nice.
Faceless Haven is a tap at a colorless, or for 3 snow, you can turn it into a 4/3 creature with vigilance and has all creature types until end of turn. It is still a land, so you can attack with it and then use its mana anyway. Also, it had a really cool combo, cool for the person playing it, not for the person playing against it, with Book of Exalted Deeds, which allowed you to put basically you can't lose the game counter on a specific creature type. And because Faceless Haven is all creature types, it worked, and it was really absurd and crazy. And decks just did not have answers in the main deck when this first came out until Field of Ruin was reprinted, and everybody kind of needed to start playing that.
This was a weird nerf. I didn't really see them nerfing this to a 3/3. But I definitely understand why they banned it in standard, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
yeah, this card encourages you to play snow, which is a huge deal. And snow encourages you to play fewer colors, which is also a huge deal, especially when the mana is as good as we have in the current standard printings and the current design format that we have. And so when they got rid of some of those bigger spells from multicolored decks, this was another of we foresee mono white, mono red being the next big thing. Faceless Haven is a part of that, so we're just going to cut the legs out from underneath. We get it. I understand that. Also, it did help get the Book of Exalted Deeds get banned, so not for nothing. This one's an honorary banned list card, I would say, in addition to getting nerfed as well.
Yeah, I just dislike that, in that, I love creature lands. I like when they push creature lands. I feel like, the clear miss with this, the clear miss with this is that they made it almost too easy. You know what I mean? Like even the multicolor snow decks, they gave you all the duels, all the into the battlefield tap, dual lands for snow lands. So it was all the tools were there. And so I want super cool man lands in the future, but maybe not quite this pushed. All right, let's move on here to my number 4. This is a card that is not that crazy dissimilar from the one we had spoken about earlier, but it is basically just as powerful and or as important in various ways. You need to be able to control the graveyard, as the graveyard has moved into, I don't know if I'd call it as important as your hand or anything, but it's definitely a zone where you got to be aware of what's going on. You got to know what's either in their graveyard, what they played already, copies of things they've played already, what they're trying to reanimate if they're trying to reanimate, or what they're trying to get back, what are the stupid phoenixes doing in their graveyard, all that good stuff. And to stop all that nasty garbage, you lay down the Grafdigger's Cage. Grafdigger's Cage showed up in Dark Ascension as a rare artifact for 1 generic mana, 1 tiny mana, for creature cards in graveyards and libraries can't enter the battlefield, and players can't cast spells from graveyards or libraries. And man, I've always waited for that last bit there. Players can't cast spells from libraries. When can we cast more spells from libraries? We have Panglacial Worm and dot.
Well, we've got Mystic Forge, we've got Augur of Autumn, we've got
you can cast a lot of
Experimental
things.
Frenzy.
From the top of decks, right? But
Yeah,
what about
that's
the
from
inside?
libraries.
What about the inside?
Oh, you want more text like Panglacial Worm?
Yeah.
I mean, we should get more stuff like that. That would be cool.
I think it'd be cool.
But that's a relevant piece of text. I've definitely played Experimental Frenzy and then got locked out of my own library by a Grafdigger's Cage.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this card is definitely impactful in a variety of ways. I like how it shuts down many things. And I don't know, it just feels almost more answerable than the Soul Guide Lantern, because there's some play in that Soul Guide Lantern, whereas Grafdigger's just like, nope, we're just not
Grafdigger's, the interesting thing about Grafdigger's Cage is that you can still fill up your graveyard, right? Soul Guide Lantern, the threat is, it's a standoff. Are you going to fill your graveyard up? I'll remove it later. But once I remove it, my tool is gone, right? Like if I fire the bullet, the gun is empty. Whereas Grafdigger's Cage is a shield. It's an overshield. But if you remove the cage, then they let you out of the cage. And then you can start using your graveyard again.
Nice. Let's move on here to number 3. Ruben, what's number 3?
Number 3 is near and dear to many players' hearts because it was one of the cards that the Magic community helped design. Back in the day, Magic the Gathering designers said, hey, community, help us make the card. And the first time around, we built a card called Forbidden Ancient. We helped later on, many years later, helped build Want Not, or Waste Not. But in between, we designed a little card in 5th Dawn that every copy of is at least $40. And that card is named Crucible of Worlds.
Oof.
Crucible of Worlds is a 3 generic mana artifact originally from 5th Dawn that says you may play lands from your graveyard.
That's all it does.
That's all it does.
That's all it does.
I had no idea that card has gone up that much in price. Holy smokes.
Absurd.
There was a Worlds viewing party at local game stores, like Cool Stuff Games, for example, where we gave people who showed up to that event a World Championship promo, which is now worth $93. Because Crucible of Worlds is just dumb and silly and powerful. And I am in love with any Magic card that can check all the exciting boxes and be one sentence.
Yes.
One sentence. That's incredible. All right, let's move on here to Nerd Girls number 3. What you got?
All right, number 3. I think I lied. I lied. There's 3 lands. This one counts. This is a land. I didn't see it. But it's less fun, but very important in so many decks. And I think it's a very interesting card because when you use it is very important and it can mess with the tempo of your game a ton. So I think it's a unique land that offers a lot, but requires a high skill level to play. And that's Lotus Field.
Mine were 8. Very nice.
Yeah. So this is a hexproof land. When it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice 2 lands and it taps for 3 mana of any one color. So it ramps you in a sort of interesting way while kind of tempoing out some of your land and preventing you from being able to possibly use that turn. So it kind of bricks one of your turns.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
And it's got the L word in it.
Right. Lotus. If a card says Lotus, we're on board.
It's true. I mean, this card by itself has Strict Proctor showing up in historic blue-white decks so that you can play Lotus Field and just not pay its cost or whatever. It's into the battlefield trigger.
That's
just
cool.
Gets ignored. Yeah, and that's literally why they play it. I was looking at the list and I was like, why does this Teferi Wandering Emperor deck play Strict Proctor? And it's only for Lotus Field. And I'm like,
well,
okay.
And your opponents.
I mean, and your opponents is nice to stop some of that stuff, but mainly it's to stop your Lotus Field and let you have a 1 land that makes 3 extra mana beyond what you already have. And that's just incredible. So this was my number 8. This was a card that was super exciting when it showed up. The artwork itself sold for like what, $25,000+.
Yep.
Whoa.
Set a record at the time for the most expensive Magic card art ever sold.
Exactly. So this was my number 8. I thought it was absolutely terrific. And again, Strict Proctor ain't gonna see play anywhere else if this didn't exist. Yeah, one of in your brawl deck, sure.
Yeah.
All right. For my number 3 here, to try to figure out what I wanted to do with my top 3, because I feel like there's a variety of ways you can fill your criteria. You know, Ruben has his kind of his yardstick that he likes to measure by. For me, I was like, you know what? I want to include like the 3 cards that I've argued played with the most. Like, which ones do I lean on? Do I include them in almost every one of my decks that has these types of colors or effects? And which ones do I like the most? A little samey, but I don't care. It's my list. My number 3 here is a card that I absolutely just love. I think this card is amazing. They have printed the ever-loving garbage out of this card. It's been around since Weatherlight. I was not expecting in 2022, year of our Lord, I'm 40 freaking 1 years old, and I'm going like, you know what? I love a Mind Stone. I don't care if it's however many years old now, 25 freaking years old. Mind Stone is a lovely, wonderful Magic card, and I'm glad they haven't made it obsolete. Mind Stone is 2 generic mana for a common, generally uncommon these days artifact.
Yeah, usually uncommon.
2 generic mana for an uncommon artifact, taps to add a Wingding, an actual colorless, or 1 generic mana, tap, sack it to draw a card. And that's just a package.
It's great.
It's been there for years.
Yeah, it's still seeing a fair amount of play on Arena with like some of the like colorless ramp type decks, which is really neat. And anytime you see these older cards that are still getting to combo or play nice with other things that are being created now, it's always really neat.
It's mana ramp early when you want it, and it cycles from play late when you don't. It's perfect Magic card design. I love a Mind Stone, and the fact that it's still relevant and perfect to this day is great. And more than that, 2 Mind Stones stapled together in Hedron Archive and 3 of them stapled together in Dreamstone Archive are also perfect. They're also great. I can't wait for 8 mana for an artifact. Tap, add 4 Wingdings, pay 4 and tap it to draw 4 cards. That is going to be a great day.
Let's go. This card is fan, and they've kept the same artwork. They get the same 25 years. A couple promos here and there, but the same core artwork. That says a lot. Let's move on here to number 2. Ruben, what's number 2?
My number 2 has something that a lot of Magic cards don't. It's won a Pro Tour, sure. We get it, Ruben. You like cards that win events. It has gravitas, sure. We get it. It's an old Magic card. It inspired a keyword by itself, pretty much by itself, because Magic for a long time was deciding, how do we keyword this phrase that we use on a lot of Magic cards? How can we quantify what we're doing without self-referencing, right? And then they kind of gave up, because nobody's going to say you lose your mind when a card goes from your library to your graveyard. Nobody's going to go, oh, I forgot, right? Forget 5 cards. No, you mill 2 cards because of Millstone. Millstone is 2 generic mana for an artifact. It says pay 2 generic and tap it. Target player mills 2 cards. This was the win condition in blue-white control at the first Pro Tour in New York in 1996.
I like mill decks.
I mean, I don't like mill decks. They're miserable to play against.
It is frustrating to lose somehow, but it's like a psychological thing. Like, how do I lose to my deck? Because milling is kind of like a burn deck, except for that your opponent starts at 60 life.
Right. I mean, humans are loss averse. And so when you see all of your cool things being lost, whether or not the fact that you would be able to play them or be able to do anything with them in the game whatsoever, just to watch all of your options just go to the grid, just die and fall away. You're like, but I could have done something with those cool options that you got rid of. And I mean, Tasha's hideous laughter being copied is, that's an experience. I don't know if I like that experience, but it is an experience.
But what about getting 2 cards milled at a time? Is that better or is that worse?
That's fine. It's not overwhelming. Like, these days it's mill 8, mill 10, mill equal to 20 CMC or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's big time. This was back in the day when it was like, poke. And you're like, okay. You're like, ow, that hurts after a while. That hurts after a while, but it takes a minute. Nerd Girl, what is your number 2?
All right. So number 2 is a newer card that's kind of seeing a lot more play than I would have thought. And I developed an opinion about this card very, very quickly because it was my preview card. And I was the very first non-wizardy person to see it. And I admittedly didn't think it was that great. Like, I was like, oh, this is cool. But like, it's probably a little too slow. But as it turns out, Key to the Archive is not too slow. It's very good.
Really good.
So this is a 4-mana artifact. Key to the Archive enters the battlefield tapped. When Key to the Archive enters the battlefield, draw a card from Key to the Archive's spell book, and then discard a card. And then you can tap, add 2 mana in any combination of colors. So it ramps you. It gives you a card stays even. It's not card advantage, which is one of the reasons I wasn't a huge fan of it. But those cards are super powerful. The mana is super relevant. Teferi can untap this stupid thing and give you all of your mana back, and it feels crazy good. So I was glad to have this as a preview card.
I was, and I feel like it's kind of obvious in hindsight, but the first time I played this ever, I was like, oh my god, I got to discard a card? Oh, okay. That wasn't really expected. But then I got Time Warp. Like, the fact that you get Approach of the Second Sun or Time Warp from this card alone is just dumb. Like, it's just way
right. It does
crazy.
feel a little bad when your cards are like Lightning Helix, Doomblade, Putrefy, but sometimes you just need a Lightning Helix, Doomblade, or Putrefy.
Yeah.
And then you also get a shot at Day of Judgment. And you also get a shot at Counterspell. Like, the spell book is all the hits. It hits you in the nostalgia, and it also is super powerful. It's a wonderful, absolutely wonderful card.
Yeah, it's a lot. And some have asked, is it too good? Is it too powerful? A 4-mana artifact that enters the battlefield tapped, that doesn't affect the board. You have to untap and do stuff with it later. Yeah. It doesn't give you the card to let it cast for any color of mana. You have to still fulfill those requirements. So if you destroy the key, they can't make Lightning Helix mana in their blue-black deck. They're just going to have a Lightning Helix sitting in their hand the rest of the game. So that's kind of cool too. I appreciate that. For my number 2, this is arguably one of the most recent mistakes that Wizards has made. And this is arguable a mistake that they are really having trouble fixing. It's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube when they do certain things for Magic. And for example, one of the examples, a good example, not this one, but a good example is the Soul Rings in the Commander decks. There's a Soul Ring in every Commander deck. From now, ever since they came out with one, as far as I recall, till today, the most recent precons, you have a Soul Ring in there. Good, bad, or ugly. Is that a good thing? I don't know. Does that mean the format has 98 cards and a Commander? Maybe, question mark. But then they kind of did it again with Arcane Signet, my number 2. It's 2 generic mana for a common artifact that says tap, add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. This also was very famous for, when it first showed up, it was very expensive because every commander player wanted one. And Wizards was like, please, we're going to make more of them, we promise. It's like $1.20 or so now. But there for just a hot minute, this thing was like $20. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, because all the pressure had built up behind him, and it was immediately a necessary card for basically every commander deck.
It goes in every commander deck ever, not questioned. So
yeah,
there you go.
That is a good thing to have. I think that in order for commander decks to be smooth and consistent, I mean, granted, you're drawing a different part of your deck every single game, but you want the mana base to be there. And I think cards like the Signets and things like that are pretty important. And Command Tower is another one of those sort of enablers that play off your commander and allow you to play the game, which I think is super important.
Yeah.
And that was going to be my ultimate, I chose between basically Arcane Signet and Command Tower, which is, I basically use both of them very frequently, but Arcane Signet in the fact that it ramps you. Like, Tower's nice that it fixes your mana, okay, but this ramps you forward, just needs 2 mana of any color, fixes everything magically. It's a terrific magic card.
I will say, I do like the deck building constraint that I put on myself of trying to build decks that don't need either the Signet and or the Tower. For example, there's no Arcane Signet in my Arcades deck. There's no Command Tower in my monocolored commander decks, obviously.
Makes sense.
And so I think that there's interesting interaction to be had with a building constraint upon yourself. With that said, it is building for commander, and so I see why there's frustration there, because strictly based on what is the best, this is the best.
Well, I guess we will see as we turn here to number 1. Nerd Girl, what's number 1?
All right. Number 1 is a card that I love and hate. I love it just because I like what it is. I like the character, but I hate having it played against me in Magic, and it's one of the things I hate the most in all the land, and that's having my opponent resolve an Ugin the Spirit Dragon. Not a lot feels worse than that, and it's an 8-mana colorless planeswalker that comes in with 7 loyalty. For +2, Ugin the Spirit Dragon deals 3 damage to target creature or player. -X, exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less. That's 1 or more colors. Okay, maybe you have some colorless stuff, probably not. And for -10, which is not hard to get to, you gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, and put up to 7 permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. You only have to activate the +2 twice.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
what?
crazy. Not surprisingly, because it's me, this is my number 8.
Of course.
Yeah, of course it is. I hate this card. When you were saying one of the biggest mistakes in recent memory, I thought you were talking about Ugin getting reprinted, because
it's arguable.
This card being in standard was so oppressive for multiple several month periods. Like, it wasn't the best thing to be doing the whole time, but there was a period of time where it was like, you cannot play an aggro deck. Like, you just can't do it because Ugin exists, and it's just a race to see if I deal you 20 damage or you get 8 mana, and that's the entire game.
And yeah, that's about as good as it got. You know, there's a $50 extended art version. Hell, there's 2 $50, $60 versions that are extended art, which are really cool. I like big, huge, splashy things. I'm like, that's cool.
I love Ugin.
Neat. But like the fact that it's generic mana, the fact that it goes into any ramp deck ever, the fact they had to ban it out of the brawl formats because, again, it just went into any brawl deck ever for your top end. And the way that it hates on colored permanents, which is very unique and painful. I like powerful stuff, but yeah, this can be put to a sideline or two. I'm okay with that. Ruben, what's number 1?
Number 1 is my number 1 for a couple of reasons. It has won a Pro Tour, and it's in the cube. So it did both things. It was also a preview card for Magic Mics. So it is near and dear to my heart. And it also has the word Lotus in it. And so I feel like all of these things, both separately and together, make it so that I want to put Gilded Lotus at my number 1.
Nice.
Gilded Lotus is 5 generic mana for an artifact that taps to add 3 mana of any one color to your mana pool. It came in Mirrodin. It was reprinted in From the Vault 20 because of how iconic and unique it is. It was reprinted in Dominaria, and most recently was in a secret lair drop with art from Mab Graves, who is a well-known sort of fantasy artist. And yeah, it's just a spectacular Magic card.
The Mirrodin foil is $45.
Sure, I believe it.
That's a lot of cheddar. All right, so for my number 1, through the process of elimination, this is Nerd Girl's number 10, clearly. This is one of my favorite Magic cards ever made. Again, I'm coming at you from back in the world of 2003 called They Like Their Sweet Rares. This is a card that I play with all of the time. I was just like, and I was thinking, man, I play with Mindstone a lot. I play with Arcane Signet a lot. But holy damn, I put this card, I want to say, if not in every single brawl deck I've ever made, it's always made it. And I'm like, I have to cut it at some point, and I don't want to, because Solemn Simulacrum is just the sickest, sweetest 4-mana 2/2 you ever seen in your life. Solemn Simulacrum is 4 generic mana for a rare artifact creature. These days, it's a golem. It didn't even have a creature type back in the day. This is Jens Thorin's invitational card, which she wanted to be blue-green, but they made it an artifact because it's Mirrodin, thank God. 4 generic mana for a 2/2 rare artifact golem, and it says, when Solemn Simulacrum comes into play, enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, put that land into play tapped. If you do, shuffle, and when it dies, you may draw a card. And it just does all the things. It fixes, it chumps, it draws. It makes me happy.
It checks a lot of boxes. It's feel-good value that's not overpowered. It doesn't make your opponent upset, but it feels like a fair Magic card. Also, a thing I like to note is that sometimes decks that are not green like fixing. If you are playing, any sort of EDH deck that doesn't include green, you're gonna struggle, and this is going to be one of the very few cards that you could put in it. And I've been in various EDH games where people assign specific generals to people, and if you end up the one that's not the green player, then you are at a slight disadvantage in some of these situations, and this is the saving grace. I love this card. It's feel good all the way around.
Shout out to Jens Thorin, Masters winner as well as Invitational champion. There's nothing bad to say about the Sad Robot. It is value. It actually did not have a great time in Standard when it was in Mirrodin, partially because a lot of things didn't have a great time in Standard in Mirrodin. Thanks, Affinity. But when it was reprinted, it saw some play, but not a ton. It was Affinity or things that beat Affinity. Right, for a long time.
In Tooth and Nail? Did it see play in Tooth and Nail?
A little bit, but Tooth and Nail wasn't better than Affinity.
It won the Pro
But
Tour,
the second time that it was printed, when it was with Primeval Titan and Rampant Growth and Kessig Wolf Run, that's when things started going off. When you go the 2/4/6 ramp route, you go Rampant Growth into Solemn Simulacrum into 6 drops. That is where things started popping off, and Solemn Simulacrum has been a player in Standard ever since, for sure.
I'm just ecstatic the fact that there was a time between Mirrodin and Commander 2011. This wasn't reprinted. This started to get really expensive. Like when Magic 2012 showed up, this was huge. Oh my God, they're reprinting this card. This card has a lot of value. Wasn't expecting to get that much value. And of course, it saw a lot of play there at the time, which was fantastic. And then Wizards started putting it into the Commander decks, which is awesome. So it brought the cost down a lot, which is great. It's still seen a bunch of printings in Mystery Boosters and Commander 2020. Most recently in Core Set 2021, which is a fantastic card. I love it, and I played the friggin' crap out of it. So there is our top 10 colorless and land cards on Arena. You'll see me on screen right now. If you review, take a look at my list, Nerd Girl's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win $50 worth of anything at CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Nerd Girl.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you.
I'll move here to our final slide. Boop to boop. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, Cardhoarder.com and AltarSleeves.com, my co-host, MTG Nerd Girl and Ruben Bressler, you guys for watching and listening, and hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe, and everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mike subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.